Morning, everyone. I'm JD Prescott, your state representative, and as you said, I serve on Ways and Means, Judiciary, Agriculture Committee. So it's an honor to serve. Been serving since 2018, 2019, my first session. Things are going really well this session. It's been fast. This year, we've actually gotten back to what I think the short session is really intended to be, more of technical changes, no major policy shifts. There's a few big bills out there, but mainly it's all been non-controversial technical type issues. I've got a few bills that I'm working on. I've got one on rules of decorum for local government meetings, just trying to help establish what those rules of decorum, just the process for establishing the rules of decorum, how to go about enforcing those, making sure that we're having civil conversations in those local government meetings. There's another part of this bill that also has to do with trespass. It did get amended. It really just clears up now the way it's amended. It really just clears up situations that came through the courts, the appellate courts. There was a court decision that stemmed out of a case in Vincent. There was a law enforcement officer that removed an individual from a loading dock area. A business owner had called law enforcement a couple days prior saying, hey, we've got some people trespassing in this loading dock. And anyway, the law enforcement showed up. They monitored the property on a pretty regular basis over the next few days. They removed an individual for trespass charges, convicted. He was convicted of that crime. And then afterwards, that individual ended up coming back and appealing that lawsuit, or appealing to the appellate court, saying that the law enforcement had no right to remove him because he was not a law enforcement officer, did not have a contractual interest in the property or the property owner. So this just clarifies that law enforcement, if it's restricted access area, it's clearly marked that no trespass, that they do have the ability to remove somebody. And this was essentially, like I said, it was essentially asked for in the appellate court decision. That bill passed the House overwhelmingly. It's now in the Senate. It passed out of the Senate committee. I believe it's on your guys' second reading calendar for Monday. So we'll see if there's other amendments. There was some amendments, tweaked public access laws that went through Senate committee as well. So that one's still working through the process. I also passed a road banning resolution for Kyle Osgood. He's a firefighter that lost his life in the line of duty in Randolph County. That one, I believe, just passed the Senate calendar on Thursday. So that one is passed out as well. Other things that's coming up, well, last week we had Senate Bill 1, which went through the House chamber. And that one is really working on or trying to get with helping improve third grade reading scores. There's a lot of things I like in the bill, but there's some things I don't like in the bill. So, I really don't know on the bill overall. But first, I'm going to talk about the parts of the bill I dislike. A lot of it is focusing on science and reading, trying to identify these students earlier, making sure that we are identifying these kids earlier, making sure they know how to read as they get out of third grade. The part that I didn't like about the bill put a lot of emphasis on that extra all the emphasis on tests. If you didn't pass the standardized test, then you'd be close. I have a problem with that, and a couple of reasons. One, we just passed legislation last year focused on science and reading, and really, when I say science and reading, it's really get back to font. Some of the techniques for 3 years of education. So we really haven't driving out legislation. So I'd like to see that first kindergartners to support their wages, see how that plays out. Let's actually let that process take place and see how it works. And then the second part of it, or the other reason I go with, I quite frankly, I trust parents with the school corporations and educators to figure out when to hold this back and move on. So from a parent's right perspective, from not putting too much emphasis on the test and just from the basic standpoint, but let the instruction from the legislation work on that. But that one did pass through the House. It's eligible to be conferred on the Senate, or to a conference committee that wants to look in the House. So that one's back over at the Senate now. Then one bill, this is one action Matt is the sponsor of. We have the statewide emergency bill, and we passed legislation to essentially allow ourselves, call ourselves back in session during the state of emergency. If we have a prolonged state of emergency, we have to say during the situation. That got struck down in the courts saying we couldn't call ourselves back in session. So what we have this go around is if there is a statewide state of emergency, it cannot be extended without the General Assembly approving so. So this bill does not say that anybody has to call it back for a special session, but it does say there can only be a statewide disaster more than 60 days. If the General Assembly passes a resolution to support it, or we could so essentially it would require us to come back, because if we're not in session, the only way we'd be able to pass that or if we were already in session. So that one's playing through next week. A few of the other bills that I've worked on, and I should also say too, Matt Lehman wanted me to say that he's sorry his phone's always be able to call into the office, email, or anything if you have questions. He had a new grandchild was born 2 days, or actually a week or so early. It was fairly early, but yeah, this last weekend his grandchild was born, so he's down in Tennessee to grandchild. So that's what he's done. And with all of us, it's always family. So then going back to the bill, the other things I've been working on, log jam removal issues and DNR issues. There's a drain task force that took place the previous 2 years. And some of the things that we identified that we needed to address, really cleaning up when somebody out of the waterway, for example. So current law and through administrative rules and DNR, they do allow you to remove a log jam, but then there's also permits if you're going to move debris, if you're going to stage debris. So what we're doing is we're just including basically everything as part of the aspect of that log jam removal is to clarify that you do not need permits to do that work, free out of waterways. And the difference between the House pass version and the Senate House version all have to do with getting into how the roof log, the way you can there and stuff. So, but overall, there wasn't very many differences between those two bills. It was one technical thing. So there was some differences between the House pass version and the Senate House version. So we're going to have a conference committees next week on that. So make sure that we have it right with DNR and make sure that mainly our farmers, landowners, can do those log jams. There's one on bobcat hunting season that I'm on as well. Established bobcat hunting season. They've really been prevalent down in southern Indiana, started to creep their way up into our area as well. Honestly, that wasn't one that I went into session planning on being a part of the discussion on. I've done a lot of hunting down in bills in the past, so I got brought in a conversation on that. Overall, I think it's a good spot that we asked to identify a season, study the trying to figure out really acting along on some of these bills. But I want to make sure we're talking about what you guys want to talk about. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Travis. We'll turn it back to you again. Sorry.
State Senator Travis Holdman is our next guest. He represents the People District 19 since 2008. He serves as the majority caucus chair and chair of the Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee. as well as sits on the Rules and Legislative Procedure and the Appropriations Committee. He resides in Markham.
Actually, I live in the suburbs of Markham.
Oh,
My wife and I have 7 acres out in the country, so we're out on about 6 miles northeast of Markham. But if you know where Zanesville is, we're just 2 miles south of Zanesville on 1,000 north. I'm sorry?
Zanesville, the big metropolitan area.
Yes, actually, yes. So, well, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here to represent the big county. My district has changed this year since redistricting. I have Adams, J, Wells, and Blackford County that I have parts are all the 3 townships in Allen County and go all the way downtown Fort Wayne. So if you know where Electric Works is, that you develop downtown Fort Wayne, half of that is in my district. So it's really spread out from here to there. Going from the northernmost to the southernmost parts of the district takes me about an hour and 45 minutes to cover that much territory. So it's a challenge some days to stay in touch with folks. And if things get too out of hand, I have my referee costume on today. So I've got to be 10:45 after my church referee 2 and 2nd and 3rd grade boys. And we have one group of 1st grade girls that I have to referee. We have over 200 kids in our upward program this year. And I've made a little girl cry this year. So my goal is not to make anybody cry for 2 more Saturdays. So as JD's given you a pretty good update on everything that's going on with the legislature. We will be finished on Friday. We have to be finished by the 14th, which is a week from Thursday. But our goal was to get out of town early this year, and so we're working towards that end. We have 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday set aside as the conference committee days, but I think conference committees may start on Tuesday, or it could be Monday. There's a few bills that have cleared that'll get started early, and so we'll see how we can get that accomplished. If you haven't got your bill cleared through conference committee on Thursday, it's probably just going to die, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes things just run out of steam, fall to the wayside, and sometimes the best way to prevent the fall from being passed. A good friend of mine, Jeff Espik, who was House Ways and Means Chair for many years in the Indiana House, told me one time, he said, the mark of being a good legislator is sometimes preventing law from passing. And I think that's an important thing for us to keep in mind. One of the things that wasn't mentioned is I chair the State and Local Tax Review Task Force, as mentioned on the back side here. We call it the Salter Task Force. And this handout, and I apologize, I forgot I left these in my car. I did a presentation yesterday for a group called the Freedom Forum in Indianapolis, and this was the handout that I used. And I had a few copies left, so I thought I'd just share those with you. The Task Review Task Force is taking a look at all taxation throughout the whole state of Indiana and across all venues. We have not really taken a holistic view of taxation in the state of Indiana for over 20 years, and I just thought it was time to do that. Last year, we passed legislation forming the task force. The House went along with us on the plan, and we decided it was time for us to take a look at what we could do to make sure that things have been equal. The tax cap legislation, which was passed in 07, 08, which became a constitutional amendment that was voted on by about 68% of people in the state of Indiana, funding tax caps. There have been ways that folks have worked around those tax caps. Referenda are outside of tax caps, so they're putting pressure on what's going on with especially homestead properties. Lots of pushback from homestead property owners, folks such as yourself, with increased assessed value. And so I'm going to get down in the weeds, so hang with me here. There's something called the MLGQ, which is the maximum levy growth quotient. Last year, we put a cap on the MLGQ at 4%. What that means is the maximum levy growth quotient is the amount or percentage of increase from one year to the next that your levy can increase. The levy is actual dollars. It's allocated to local government, to schools, cities, towns, and county government. And so we limited that to 4% growth. Last year, it would have been 4.3% payable this year, 23 payable, 24 would have been 4.3%. We limited that to 4%, so that puts some control on the amount of taxation that's able to be levied against the taxpayer for the folks to use for local government use. We do have sympathy on local government because their costs have gone up just like everybody else's. And so there's concern that we're putting a squeeze on local taxation, local units of taxation to say we're limiting your growth to 4%. But if we don't do something with that maximum levy growth quotient, the Department of Local Government Finance says that rate is going to go to 5.6% next year, 25 payable 26, and that would be a 40% increase in the levy. And we've got to do something to put a cap on that to hold it down. House Bill 1121, when it came over to me, I changed it to extend that 4% levy growth one more year, so it's a 3-year suspension of the MLGQ calculus to say we're going to limit that growth one more year to 4%. And actually, I had a group of commissioners and mayors in my office, about 20 of them, in my caucus this week, and I asked them what they thought about the 4% cap on MLGQ. And they admitted to me they could make it work. And so there's no need to expend more dollars at the local level than what they need. And so hopefully we'll keep that at the 4% level on for one more year. If it gets taken off in conference committee, we'll just come back next year and put it back on again to extend that for a period of time. After 25, payable 26, we start to see that MLGQ come back down. So we get back down to 4%, but it's going to take 4 years for it to get back to 4% based on current numbers. But not knowing what's going to happen with inflation, we're just real unsure about where that lands. Then we're going to take a look at what we're doing with property tax in the whole state of Indiana as well. I appointed a working group of legislators to work on property tax and how it impacts schools, how it impacts local government, and every facet of property tax and all the excess levies that go on. If there's extensive growth within the community or within the government, they can go above the 4%. And so we're trying to do our best to control property tax at the local level, which affects all of you. We're also looking at sales tax, local income tax, individual income tax, and corporate tax. And so we're taking a look at the whole view of taxation. And this handout just gives you an idea of where we stand. The first couple of pages shows you what our revenues look like compared to the last 6 years. And if you turn to these, starting with these maps, these come out by the Tax Foundation, probably one of the most reputable nonprofit organizations in the country. Take a look at the analysis of taxation from state to state, a good idea of what is going on. But those successive maps just give you an idea of where Indiana stands. We have been ranked number 9 for a number of years on overall tax policy in the state of Indiana, as compared to other states in the country. So we're doing pretty well. The last year we slipped to number 10 because Arizona passed a 2.5% individual income tax, which is the lowest of states that have an tax. We're on track to go to 2.9% in 27 as we inch our way down and reduce our individual income tax obligation the taxpayer has. But if we don't keep looking forward and do what we can to attract more business, keep people here in the state of Indiana, keep them from going to Florida for 6 months in a day, we're going to pay for it. And we've got to attract more people to the state to spread our tax base for your tax increase year over year. So we've got to do what we can to find that balance, that we don't overtax our own people that have lived here for a number of years, at the same time attract people to the state, people here in the state of Indiana. But that's just for your perusal. Take a look at it at your leisure. It just gives you an idea of where Indiana stands. It's just screenshots of presentation that I did yesterday, and just to give you an idea of where we're standing. So with that, I'd be glad to open up for questions. JD and I can answer your questions, and we'll take it from there. We have about 30 minutes left, so fire away. Yes, sir.
Yesterday's local newspaper article titled,
Take your time.
titled Chaplain Officers Have No Place in Public Schools. And that's something that happened in Senate Bill 50. I'm wondering, Mr. Holdman, how you voted on that.
I voted for it.
Okay. Can you give an explanation?
Sure. Sure. Well, it's a voluntary program to have a chaplain in your school, and they don't have to be paid to be volunteer. The local school board can set the parameters for whether or not they have a chaplain and whether or not they meet certain qualifications that they have. And it has to be upon the consent of the parent to talk to a chaplain as well. We have found a lot of school corporations are looking for help with mental health crises that are going on in schools, and we think this is a helpful way to do that. I know there are a lot of schools that have Youth for Christ and Campus Life work in the communities, and those are a valuable asset. We don't send those people in to proselytize students to convert them, but just to talk to them about things that may be troubling them of a secular nature, relationship at home, relationship with other students in the classroom, and the relationship with his teachers and staff at the school. And any help we can give to school corporations and kids, I think, is valuable to us. And once again, the school board and local school superintendents are basically calling the shots of what can happen.
And then the article went on to say it was shoehorned into the parent wasn't so it was shoehorned into House Bill 1157.
Yes.
So I don't know which one you would like to talk about that.
Yeah, we got most of it, I believe, got moved into that bill. I'd have to double check to see where it's at exactly in the process. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly where it's at in the process on top of my head, but it did get moved into that bill. I agree with Senator Holdman's comments on the bill itself. I think it's just another good resource for kids in classrooms, for parents to help be able to sign their kids up for this program.
Well, I just in the article wasn't very complimentary of it, and I guess if you get a chance to read it.
Well, I think you got to keep in mind there are some news organizations and some writers in the newspaper are giving you a recap of what happened, which is the news. Okay. Others are editorials that are people's opinion of how things look and their position on a certain issue. From time to time, I get lots of mail, still yet, hard mail, besides email and text messages and phone calls. I was telling somebody I get about 60 emails a day right now. And it's kind of hard to keep up with those, but the ones that trouble me sometimes are people who will send me a letter telling me that this is a position that is the truth. And it's an editorial by the editor of the newspaper or a letter to the editor. And just because somebody else has a different opinion than what you do, doesn't mean that it's the right thing. It just means that that's their opinion. And that needs to be sort of put in a different silo than the news. And so I think the newspaper, your newspaper does a good job of keeping those two things separated. But some of our newspapers, probably the largest newspaper in the state of Indiana, is still published in the state of Indiana. I'll just say it, Indianapolis Star. Sometimes in their headlines gets a little carried away, and they editorialize and bleed that into the news article itself. So you have to extract some of the truth from some of the fiction sometimes, people's opinion of what the truth is, other than just tell us like it is. And it gets more and more difficult. I'm a Fox News person myself, but sometimes I get a little frustrated with Fox News because they get a little carried away sometimes. Well, not sometimes, most of the time. They give you their opinion mixed in with the news of the day, and it's a little unsettling. But I think you see that in all of the 24-hour news cycle that we're in today. That the opinion gets bled into the actual news itself. So, go ahead, question over here.
Yes, there was a bill to increase Medicaid providers, but it didn't go anywhere because of the budget.
So there is, we did adopt some amendments into a bill on Thursday onto the Medicaid Medicare reimbursement. So one of the amendments, it would require 80% of those funds to go to the families, not to providers. And it also added some reporting requirements to the agency as well. When we came up with this, or when they had this essentially $1 billion shortfall, we had to increase revenues. It's not true fiscal hit of $1 billion. But, just to make sure that we get that ironed out. Really, those amendments that went in, there's that bill on the conference committee. There's more work done. We weren't. Honestly, I don't know if they can make it through the entire process the way that'll take place with our leading chairman, Jeff Thompson, and Travis Holdman, and the Senate as well. So we're still working through some of these issues. The administrative recommendations that the administrative side has put out there, just that at this point, they have not adopted those final rules, so they are still ironing out the administrative side as well and negotiations with us. So we're still working through it. I know it's not a very clear answer to this. It's a work in progress.
Well, the administrator also, we have talked to last week. He was pleased with the original bill, but he didn't understand why it hadn't gone very far. And I told him, I said, well, this is not a budget year.
Anything that has a fiscal impact, we've been reducing the fiscal impact out of ways. I know appropriations have been doing the same thing on their side. Another thing, I want to come back real quick to that we will have to vote on it as a House body before any of those changes get not your topic, the topic mentioned up on the House side yet. Like I said, put it into a House bill, Senate now, so but we will have to address that next week when it comes back across with either conference committee report or
Last session, speaking about Medicaid, last session provides the plan where we would review the raise schedule every 4 years, depending upon the deliverer of services. So dentists, eye doctors, hospitals, pediatrics, all of those areas have a different pay scale or reimbursement scale. It was going to be reviewed every 4 years, and we gave everybody a 2% increase. We pulled back on that because we found that we had a $900 million, nearly $1 billion shortfall than what we thought we had with Medicaid. And a big piece of that was the attendant care program, which many of you may have heard about, read about lately in the newspaper, where if someone has an infant, let's say you have a baby that's born and it's determined that it has a severe condition that makes it disabled, that family could apply for attendant care so that if the mother chose to stay at home from work, she could actually be paid to take care of that baby 24/7. That program was started by Medicaid, unbeknownst to us as legislators, the month before the pandemic began. And we found that there were families where the mother or the father was the attendant that was taking care of the infant, was getting up to $130,000 a year attendant care fees. The other piece that's a big kicker with that is there's no means test for that federal program. So someone could be making $600,000, $700,000 a year, husband could be working, making that much money, come home to a wife that's making $130,000 a year to take care of their infant that she would have to have taken care of whether she was being paid or not. It sounds very callous and cruel and mean to say, well, we're not going to pay to take care of those babies. But at the same time, we've got to be able to afford that. And Medicaid is one of those programs that's federally mandated, and it's going to eat us alive, folks, if we're not careful. The biggest piece of Medicaid, the biggest share of Medicaid goes to pay for long-term care, for nursing home care for the aged. But there are things that people do, and I'm probably going to offend some people in the room, get me in trouble, but I'll just go ahead and say it. We have programs where you can shelter your assets to make yourself eligible for Medicaid sooner than otherwise. You can form a trust, it's an irrevocable trust, take all your assets, your farm, your bank account, put all that in trust. And if you get past 5 years where you go into a nursing home, then basically that look-back period guarantees that if you get past the look-back period, it guarantees that those assets are all safe and secure, and they get passed on to your heirs, and you don't have to use those assets to pay for nursing home care. That's a good thing. The bad thing is you don't have to pay for nursing home care, so who pays for it? If you don't, we do. And that's what's eating us alive, is that practice of sheltering assets. There's nothing political, nothing in our DNA, nothing that says that when you die, you get to leave everything to your children. I think the bootstrap way of who's your government, who's your standards are, you pay your own way. And if you've done that, I'm sorry. I practice law, and I have people that come into me and say, I want you to set up a trust with me to shelter my assets so that when I die, all my assets, if I have to go to a nursing home and become ill in my later years, all of those assets pass to my kids. And I just tell them I can't do that. I think it's unethical for us to do that, and we can't afford to do it as a state to allow that to continue. And we're taking a look at that next year when we come back next session, how we control Medicaid costs based upon long-term care expenses. Sorry if I offended somebody.
And Travis made a really good point on the attendant care piece as well, on the amount these families are getting paid. Just to put it in perspective too, our program that was established is actually so generous that people are moving to Indiana from other states because of the amount they can receive here. So they're essentially moving in to live off of our present bank.
And you're automatically eligible as long as you don't have Medicaid in another state. Come to Indiana, you can be paid day one. You become eligible for Medicaid day one. Come to the state.
The administrator I talked to, he had said that they were looking at only taking Medicaid from their own county residents, period. Also looking at only having available a certain amount of spots, decreasing the amount of spots they have to take care of it. So then what do we do with the people who don't get it? Then what?
Well, that's one reason we have health departments and other Medicaid providers in other counties and other areas that can provide that. Currently, that is not the state law that you can provide Medicaid services to anybody in the state, as long as they qualify for Medicaid and Medicaid recipient. They don't have to have a residency requirement, other than they have to be from Indiana or have Indiana Medicaid. So, yes, sir. Bill.
Let's talk about Senate Bill 1. JD touched on it. As a teacher at the Big Academy, we spend a lot of time talking about this reading skills that have. We try to make a decision whether it should be passed on or not. I'm kind of concerned with testing 3 different times. How do you think that's going to make a difference on there? What the teachers across the state installed on that? I'm not sure that's the answer to all the problems they would have with reading and writing. Back, the whole bigger issue than that I see from my office that I have in high school that's still not right. My problem is I started out as a 6th grade teacher, and it's all about reading comprehension. I had a 6th grader that he had 3 or 4 paragraphs on the front page for them to read. On the back page, they had 10 questions on those, and they could get 3 or 4 of them right. And so I brought that up in a lot of our meetings about reading comprehension. There's a lot of kids that read some, but they can't comprehend much reading. I'm testing out the answer.
Well, the testing is done to screen those kids out who need remediation. And right now in the state of Indiana, and Superintendent Gully, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been told that 70% of summer school dollars are spent for physical education. And those are typically how that plays out is kids who are doing advanced placement and AP classes, and kids who are trying to graduate early will take those summer courses as PE to get them out of the way, so they have more room on the schedule for academic purposes. But I don't think really that's what we need to be spending summer school dollars for. We need to be spending summer school dollars for remediation for kids who can't read. The sooner we can screen those kids out, the better we're going to be to make sure that they're able to read. But there's enough exemptions and exclusions in that bill, I think, that takes care of most situations. To provide parents with an out that they feel like the child needs to go on. We had Senator Bassler, who does the school formula piece. He spoke against the bill and voted against the bill because he himself couldn't read when he was in the 3rd grade. And he had all kinds of help and summer school help, and he was talking about the stigma of not being able to read and having to go to summer school and be in a special class than the rest of the students that were his friends, and the negative consequences of that. And so there's both good and bad with retention, but we just need to do our best to make sure that kids can read better. Floor, Senator Gully. Senator Gully, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Well, I say learning to read, reading to learn, that concept. I remember the kid did too. You were taught how to read, and once you got it, you could then read and learn. That's so about 60% of the kids in this, we take the test in the 2nd grade. We volunteered to chose because we wanted to identify issues with kids early. So we had more time to work with. About 60% of the kids passed that test in the 2nd grade. So that gives us more time to focus on the 40%. That's a year ahead of when they would normally. It's a fact what you say about summer school. Over time, a lot of our kids take agriculture classes in the summer, supervised ag. They take PE and things to get a chance to get that out of their schedule. College class. That's a good thing. But there's only so much allocation of dollars to solve both of those issues. So you're going to have to reimagine how we support the kids. Janesville's got the largest private donation of any school that I know in the state. $200,000 from the Foundation. Folks about where the rest of the state is on IRE free pass rates. I don't like that. I'd like to be ahead. We're making changes on how we assess kids, where the teachers actually assessing the child get about 7 or 8 years ago. So there's things which we're gonna have to look at our budget. If we're gonna have more summer school, I don't think there was an appropriation to carry forward dollars to pay for that. So we're just gonna have to manage those funds differently. And I'm confident kids here are gonna do well. And, yeah, we're working.
You're well represented by this guy. I'll tell you, he's well known throughout the whole state of Indiana. That's a state house, probably functions very well. Does a great job and great asset for us. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask a question about House Bill 1383, which was a bill that passed during the time of the governor. What it did was it significantly reduced the amount of protected wetlands in the state by redefining them. We redefined them a couple of years ago. The effects of that haven't even really been seen, and now this bill comes in and significantly reduces it even more. What's concerning to me about it is that last summer there was a set of hearings that environmental protection groups weren't even invited to. No environmental protection testimony was heard about what reducing the wetlands would do to our aquifers, to our groundwater, and things like that. And then this bill comes in this time, and whereas you guys normally do, your chamber works on it this half, and then the second half your chamber works on it. It didn't happen this time. This bill was ramrodded through in half of the session. By halftime, it went through both chambers. Committee hearings were significantly limited, and I don't know, that doesn't play to why. And it still takes effect July 1st. The same as every other bill that you guys are getting done with. So why was it ramrodded through? It goes toward transparency for me, why this bill had to go through so fast.
Well, I wouldn't say it was ramrodded through, but the same legislative process.
It was a bill because it went through in half the time.
But it still went through the same process. I was a co-author on this bill, so I worked directly on this bill. First, there were groups that were consulted during this. There was from all sides of the issue, including the environmental groups. So they were consulted. They just did not agree with, some of them did not agree with the final product of the bill, but they were consulted during the entire process. Also, on committee testimony, anybody who signed up in their committee testimony, nobody was. What the bill does, though, it does a couple things. One, you're right, we did pass a bill a couple of years ago to change the wetlands levels, level 1, level 2, and the level 3 wetlands, the class 1, class 2, class 3 wetlands. What this does is it goes back and really goes to the intent of the previous bill that we did. I forget the bill number from a couple of years ago. It's been 2 or 3 years ago on that one. And it, what we really did was realign the class 1, class 2, class 3 wetlands, what the intent of the previous bill was passed. So when we passed the previous bill, what I did, PNR did, they came through and they essentially stopped classifying anything as class 2 wetlands. They moved all the class 2 wetlands to a class 3 wetland, or they moved some from class 2 to a class 1 wetland. So essentially no more, or very few class 2 wetlands as we previously defined. So all we did was redefine it, made sure that we were going with the intent of what we previously defined. The second aspect of what it did was they made sure that as a builder, if they're planning a project, or anybody, if you are disturbing a wetland, but if you're leaving part of that wetland intact, the part of the wetland that you leave intact, that counts as part of what you are to remediate. So an example, I know the commissioners are talking about the 68-acre project out here, and that's part of it. So part of that project plan, at least the plan that I've seen, there's a wetland on that farm, and part of the plan was to leave that wetland, but then move and reestablish part of the wetland over here, part of the walking trail, and other things. So like for that project, for example, if they went through with the plan that I've seen, then that part of the wetland that they are not touching, if they're leaving intact, that would count towards what they need to offset for. So, no, it is not, you're not gonna see a reduction of wetlands, it's just class, it basically just reclassifies everything. Do you have anything to add on that, Travis?
No, I was just alarmed at your take on the process.
My take on the process was that it was rushed through. It was really rushed through the process.
Well,
And I don't see the urgency of why that one needs to be rushed through the process.
I don't know that that was the case, that it was rushed.
It's the only one that was this year.
Well, there's lots of bills that move quicker than others, and it's just that you're not aware of what bills are moving fast, or which ones are moving faster or fast track. There are a few bills that are fast tracked to be moved through the process to get to the governor's desk to sign, but it's mostly because of federal deadlines. Right? Nobody is denied an opportunity to speak at an interim study committee. You can ask people to serve on the education committee or judiciary committee or the environmental committee on the Senate side, because those hearings go on forever. Well, we can't call you to tell you.
No, I'm saying that the groups that have talked to me about it, didn't even, and they were the big groups that should have been, didn't even know that the meetings were happening.
No, that is not true. Those are published for every citizen in the state of Indiana to find out, because those agendas and those notices of meetings have to go out. There's a whole schedule legally that we have to follow, and all of those are followed with every bill, every interim study committee hearing that's held. People are giving advance notice and come. If you're engaged in the process, you know how the system works, and you know that you got to follow the process. So if they told you that, that's not necessarily true. I'll editorialize here, okay? Give you the news. What I gave you is the news. The other piece is to tell you that they just didn't do the job, if that's the case. So let's go back here.
Yeah, if I could, my name's Michael Keller, so I live here. I have worked away from home for multiple years, and once COVID started, I worked so I'm engaging a lot more, but I lived here my entire life. First, a couple of observations. So, for Mr. Prescott, a few years ago, they released the river otters, and so those are a little bit confusing. They kind of wiped out all of the fish, but not ponds. So they're a little bit. Second of all, observation, a few years ago, I had to switch to the government portal to get health insurance. My old insurance basically wouldn't pay for anything until I consumed about $10,000 with my money. And didn't pay, so I switched to a program in the portal. Last year, I worked 60% overtime, and in doing so, they basically doubled. So the premiums I paid this year, when I then filled out my tax form and figured out how much money I paid, and I had to pay an extra $12,000. I doubled the total year's worth of premiums I had to pay for when I paid my taxes. So there's some form of guarantee there where the insurance companies are guaranteed that they will make a certain level of profit. So that's an observation for the one here. You weren't aware of that. So I ended up with an extra $12,000 basically that I paid. First question then that I have is Jay County, obviously, and Randolph County actually are the top 10 highest income tax brackets for the counties. So you talk about taxes and increases and things of that nature, but you didn't actually talk about the farm taxes. So land prices, I estimated that there are roughly $4.8 billion of land in Jay County, and then I netted out towns and things of that nature. So there's about $3.8 billion worth of farm. You're familiar, obviously, during the farming business, your family business, that tax rate is roughly 1/5 of a homeowner's taxes. Now, that tax money can't go anywhere. You can't do the farming and things of that. But is it reasonable now with the economy? And I realize that the American farmer competes with the rest of the world in farming grain prices. Is it feasible now to look at the tax rate so that rural counties don't require that the house owner pays that majority of the tax, but a little bit
Yeah, so actually, if you look at the tax revenue coming into the county, the farmers actually pay close to 80% of that tax revenue to the county.
Sure.
And so the homeowners are actually not paying near as much as the businesses and the landowners. So by the time you take your homestead deduction, your 65 and older deduction, your veterans deduction, your any of those deductions, you add that up. Those once you deduct that from the homeowners, that gets shifted on to businesses and landowners on the farm side of it. So I would say that farms are paying the vast majority of the taxes.
So you're not paying that, the amount is not really related to the value of the property. Everything else is related to the value of the property, except for the farm land. And I realize it's a burden. The farmer is going to bear the burden of the higher tax, and the food consumer bear a portion of that. I think it's fair to look at that. Is the formula that was made in the late 2000s the same formula that should be used for now, when the land prices skyrocket?
Well, the rate for farm ground is going up this year, what, 250,
Quite a bit, yeah.
230, 250 bucks per acre. So that is being shifted back towards the farm ground a bit more than what it would have been, to the tune of, I think, statewide starts out about 42. I just saw these numbers this week. It's about $42 million more in revenue will be coming into the counties, to local units of government from ag land, based upon that formula. And that formula is not, it's dynamic. It changes with production costs and capitalization rate that's used to basically put the amount of ag land value to attach that to the ag land. And so that is changing, and it's going up, and it's predicted to go up again, I think, in 2 years. So I think for the next 10 years, you're going to see ag land increase in value for taxation purposes. You're right, you really would be fair to put market value on farm ground, because we would all go hungry because farmers couldn't afford to farm if that's the case. So there's, through negotiations and the use of Purdue agroeconomics department, that they formulate that rate for ag land. It's based upon a very complex formula that I couldn't recite.
I've seen the video, 2-hour video where published it. So it's out there.
So, if you can't sleep at night, watch that video.
You're absolutely right.
It's pretty tough.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
House Bill 1183, I just wondered where that's at, has to do with ownership of agricultural land. That's through the House.
It's on second reading Monday. I'm a little bit concerned about it because it's overly broad in my estimation, but it's support on both parts. Because the limitation on critical things like electric generation, military bases, you take the 50-mile view of those, and you put that on a map, it covers about 90% of the whole state of Indiana. So I'm not sure that prevents someone who comes here on a green card from some other nation that's on our list, the bad list, as we call it, if they come here on an open Chinese restaurant, Chinese national that has a green card, they would be prevented from going to business if that were the case, which I think is somewhat overly broad. We're just trying to prevent infiltration of foreign companies coming to the state of Indiana. And I'm not sure that we catch it with that language that's in the bill. Like I said, the bill got to put on our part.
Doesn't the bill specify agricultural land in the bill?
I don't think it does.
I thought it did. And I'm for the bill too, but then I have issues with agenda that's owned by China,
That's right.
and they need to be able to do research in the United States, sell chemicals and seed. So how do you?
My understanding is any existing businesses basically gets grandfathered in. So they would be able to.
And I think there was also too, they have to have, there's a certain percentage of ownership as well. So you get,
Majority.
yeah, majority ownership, 51% would be where it'd be triggered. So if there's some companies that don't have 51%, they'd be okay as well.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. And if you have any other questions for the legislature, I'm sure they'll be glad to take them to their various communication networks that are available to you. So I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, you're wrong. They put an amendment in on Tuesday that changes or was trying to change the open door law for either a quorum of a committee, say like 2 commissioners or 3 of 5 councilmen from a town could meet for lunch and do something. Now, the amendment was defeated, but if you want to talk intelligently about what you're talking about, you will have to go back and watch the committee hearing. I put that out last night. You can go back and watch that. That's the Corrections and Criminal Law Committee hearing. You can see that on the channel. I put that out yesterday, so you can go back and watch that. But that's what that comment was talking about. Amazing. You comment without knowing what you're talking about. It wasn't good. I thought